maybe I didn't understand what you meant by we either convince the Nazi or we bash him with a rock, because it felt more like you're saying, like, if we can't get him to agree with the axiom we should care about black people, then we're going to have to bash his skull in. And I would argue that you can totally, and this is what I'm interested in. Would you agree that if you get the Nazi to care about their own subjective self-interest and get them to care about following the ethical framework that would be best for them, that you could argue to them that they shouldn't kill black people and Jews?
I think you could, I think you could logically argue a Nazi into being quiet about their ideas. Through self-interest, I think you could tell a Nazi basically what, like, the American government told all the Nazis we brought over through Operation Paperclip. We can be like, okay, I can't de-Nazi you, but if you want to keep your job here, you should shut the fuck up. Like, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up. If you make a fuss, you're going to get in trouble, okay? I think you can convince them that way, and that's kind of what we've done. But as we've realized since the 1960s, that doesn't get rid of racism. That's what we did with racism, right? We didn't really ideologically eliminate racism in this country. Instead, what we did was we basically made it publicly intolerable. We made it illegal to express in the workplace and in hiring decisions and stuff like that. And we made it like, okay, so before you could say the N-word openly, and now you can't in most places in America. And that further and further that goes. We didn't really get rid of the racism, though. We just kind of convinced them that it's better to be quiet about it. And now, like, we have a fascist, Donald Trump, popular with the same people who would have just been openly saying the N-word before, in large part because he represents a kind of open expression of a lot of the intolerance that they've been quietly going about for a while. So I think you can logically convince people to be Nazis or be racists in quieter ways, but eventually the point is going to come where they're going to think like, oh, this is our chance. Because that's what you're really telling them, right? You're telling the Nazi, stay quiet, now's not the time, tomorrow might be. And that's really nothing but a holding mechanism to really move them away from being like a Nazi or a racist or whatever. The best thing you can do is subject them to the kind of subjective interference that moves people over. So one of the best ways to make people less racist is to put them in a neighborhood where they encounter people of different races. If you're ideologically a Nazi, like you believe that the Aryan race is like God-given, like destined to rule the world, blah, blah, you know, then technically spending time with a black person or being around them shouldn't make you less racist. Logically, that shouldn't affect your racism, because your racism shouldn't be tied to the actual behavior of non-white people. You might believe that all races are equal, but still believe the Aryan race is like epistemically superior, like beyond empirical analysis. A lot of religious people believe stuff like that. That's common to the belief of Jewish people, right? Like the Israeli fascists, right? Like a lot of them, like literally the chosen people. Like, it's not like Jewish people are out here arguing like, you know, well, I believe we're the chosen people because this demographic. Like, it's like a God-given thing, you know? So logically, being around a black person shouldn't make a Nazi less of a Nazi, but it does. And I think that's because no matter how, like, well-defined a person's convictions, the fact that they're all arbitrary kind of works in our favor sometimes. Our moral presuppositions may be arbitrary, but theirs are too, which means that they can be moved by emotional bias. And that's the idea, right? Like, it's not like when I say like deploy the rock, I'm being kind of sort of like deliberately comedically simplistic. But what I mean to say really is that, like, there are some unresolvable differences through logic, and that sometimes you just have to rely on, like, the weight of social pressure and circumstance to pull people towards better positions. You know?
But I didn't just use logic there. I also assumed that the person cares about their own best interest.
But there are martyrs all the time, and a lot of them are good people, right? Socialist revolutionaries have been martyrs in countries all over the world. And they
again, I think you can care about your own self-interest, and from that perspective, you subscribe to an ethical, or you adopt an ethical framework that does, I mean, in theory, if it were applied, maximize your best interest. And in line with this ethical framework, you come to the realization, and you're correct, that martyrdom is necessary. It doesn't mean, right, that it doesn't mean that in an act utilitarian, but it's what you believe as well. It doesn't mean that in an act utilitarian sense, like, martyrdom will be most pleasurable for you. Like, no, I agree with you. That's absurd. But
You're agreeing with self-sacrifice for the betterment of some larger cause. The cause you're biased in selection for here, though, is the well-being of everyone. That is not the cause that Nazis
no,
believe
no,
in.
no, no, no. I'm not saying you have to be interested in the well-being of everyone. I'm just interested in you being interested in the well-being of yourself, because I can argue to the moral egoist that they should care about everyone. I mean, Stirner already did that, Max Stirner. So, I mean, I don't really have to go so far. And again, morality proves that if you're interested in the well-being of yourself, you should be interested in other people's well-being.
I don't know.
Like,
I don't think it can prove anything.
well, okay, it doesn't prove it, but I feel like
But that's my argument.
I feel like, oh gosh, um, but looking at the way morality functions, um, or looking at the way morality exists, it seems as if like morality, the way it was refined by natural selection, by what makes humans, by what propagates the genes the most.
But that doesn't make it morally right. You know, humans
No,
don't.
no, no, no. Of course not. Of course not. Of course not. I'm not trying to say this is the way it is, therefore it's right. I'm just drawing on it for support for the claim that ethics is in your best interest.
Yeah, but you're defining ethics with bias here. You're defining ethics as being something which pertains to a self-interested respect for broader social development.
I kind of defined that at the beginning of the convo. Yes, I did.
Right,
I said
but that's the arbitrarity
about maximizing.
I'm referring to.
Yes.
And keep in mind, we're self-selecting for humans here. All the stuff that Nazis do with their like arbitrary moral designation for who they care about, we do with humans too. There are plenty of perfectly consistent ethical positions which include animals as part of the groups which we should give this ethical leeway to. But we arbitrarily draw the line at humans because we're androcentric. Naturally, of course, that is a product of our evolutionary bias. We are literally humans. But like, if you believe that you can draw lines on that, and people do, because people do draw those lines, even vegans have their lines, you know, they'll step on ant colonies. You know, we destroy microbiotic systems when we wipe our face with paper towels. You know, there's always a line somewhere. Nazis usually don't believe their victims are humans. You know, at the end of the day, like, choices have to be made here. That's the only argument that I'm making. There are choices have to be made, and none of them are objective choices. I think some of them are better, but only because I'm standing from the position where I think they're better.
I'm not interested in... I'm not interested... When you say objective, do you mean like objective within the context of in the context of like how human society?
No, nothing is universally objective, like written in the stars or whatever. But even within the intersubjective framework, I don't think, because when we talk about like ethics being objective, I don't really think we should defer to what like the human society trends us towards, or like what we like the lessons we can learn from our biological instincts or whatever, because I think that leads us in bad directions. I think the problem you're running into is that you're referring to natural predilections towards self-interested behavior as kind of an ethical guideline, but then when that same ethical guideline draws us towards behavior we do consider unethical, you're saying, okay, well, it's not like a full guideline. But you can't like, it's either determinative or it's not, right? Like, self-interest can make a person care for their family, and self-interest can make a person be a slaver. You know, it's I don't think it's that good of a predictor, like, on its own. We have to structure things.
I think self-interest has to be considered almost like from an armchair perspective, and that's the only way it's going to help you like make your life better and make society at large better, and importantly for the vast majority of humans, make the lives of those they care about better. Now, I'm actually on the topic of veganism that you brought up. Yeah, totally. I agree. I'm actually vegetarian. Many humanists are these days. Especially secular humanists. I know you have to draw the line at somewhere, and I do, but I would argue that it's not in the Nazis' best interest to draw the line where they do. And not only that, I mean, they're objectively wrong when they draw the line there, because, I mean, black people aren't like fundamentally different in a way that like their neighbors
I don't
or
think you
like
can
animals are.
I don't think you can say they're wrong in an objective sense. It's a moral delineation. You can make arguments on biology.
I think I can say they're wrong in an objective sense, in the sense that like they have values, they're capable of acting morally, like black people, I mean, in a way that like animals can't.
I don't think that has
or
anything
some
to
animals
do.
can.
I don't think that
But
makes
it
any.
does because it seems like the Nazis' justifications for not caring about black people is the fact that they're subhuman. But if we can prove that they're just as human, the
You
marginal
can't.
cases
But
argument
you
that
can't.
vegans use,
You
if
can't
you could
prove.
prove that they're just as
You
human,
can't though. You can't prove. Not in the way the Nazis meant human.
well, how do they mean human? I mean, if
There's
it's
an
kind of like a definitionally correct.
What are we, linguistic prescriptivists? They thought there was
I mean,
something morally different about the Aryan race. They also thought there were things that were biologically different about the Aryan race, but most of their propaganda, it wasn't just our genes are better. A lot of it was like God's chosen, again, like the Zionist line. You could, like, if you talk to an ideologically determined Nazi, they will still argue the innate inferiority of a black person, even if they understand and accept that every single empirical measurement between them and that black person is the same. And I don't think you can say they're objectively wrong in that because they're using terms and definitions that don't even refer to objectivity. There's nothing empirical to touch on. We're talking about like a purely moral designation, which is why you keep a rock on hand.
I think okay. I think you actually touched on something that I totally agree with. Oh gosh. I
Like
was reading
you can
chat. Why
see
did I do
this
that?
you can see this a lot with bigotry, right? Like especially consider modern scientific racism is only a couple hundred years old. Before then, we were still highly tribal. Plenty of different kingdoms, peoples, nations, religions, ethnic groups hated each other. And what was the predominant explanation for their hatred? It was not, oh, these people are biologically worse than us. It was a kind of vague gesturing towards epistemic inferiority, like God has determined that we are the greater people, or there's something just morally better about us. And a lot of it was just pure undistilled, or sorry, like distilled tribalism. Like we're better than them because we're us and they're them. Like we're the good ones and they're the bad ones, and that's
Right.
it. And none of that can
But
be disproven through empirical measurements. You couldn't go up to them with like a brain scan of one of the other groups and go like, ah, no, you're wrong. You're actually the same. It doesn't matter to them. So, and all of these are moral judgments. You have to attack the
I know,
axioms.
I know, and oof.